must one man have before he can hear people cry? How many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
The year was 1965, and Lyndon B. Johnson was President of the United States. It was the era of rebellion, from the fight for equal rights for blacks to rebellious teenagers and a growing counterculture movement. People were rebelling against just about everything, and this included U.S. involvement in Vietnam. The people who seek the removal of soldiers from Vietnam were called Doves, and they were unpopular, seeing as how it was the early years of the war, and many mistakenly believed the whole ordeal would be over and done with soon enough.
It was on December 16, 1965, in Des Moines, Iowa, 13-year-old Mary Beth Tinker and 16-year-old Christopher Eckhart walked into school wearing black armbands. These armbands were worn by those who protested the Vietnam War and supported the Christmas truce called for by Senator Robert F. Kennedy. The school board had previously ruled these armbands as contraband, disruptive to the education of students. Christopher and Mary Beth were suspended from school, not for disrupting class or for fighting in the halls, but merely because they wanted to express their hopes for peace.
Mary Beth's older brother John and her two younger siblings would wear the bands to school the next day. John Tinker attended North High School while Mary Beth went to Harding Junior High. John would face suspension as well, while the two younger children would not face much consequence. Their father told them, "People are going to say, 'There goes those Tinkers again,' but supported their actions wholeheartedly."
Two other lesser-known students, Christine Singer and Bruce Clark, also wore these armbands. The principals decided the students would only be permitted into the school if they stopped wearing the armbands. However, this brave group would stand their ground and only re-enter once the protest officially ended on January 1st, 1966. Little did they know that this would become a landmark Supreme Court case regarding freedom of speech in public schools.
It did not take long for the Tinkers to take the problem up to the Des Moines School Board for deliberation. The principals had claimed previously that the armbands were distracted to students learning in school, and the school board agreed, ruling in their favor 5-2. The Tinkers then took the case to their district court in Des Moines, sure they would win. To their surprise, the district court dismissed the complaint on the grounds that, quote, "the regulation was within the school board's power," end quote. The students would then appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals, but lost to their astonishment. The court would affirm the district court's ruling, but offered no explanation as to why. Frustrated, but never claiming defeat, the Tinkers decided to take this up with the Supreme Court in 1968.
The Tinkers argued that the schools had unlawfully suspended them. They caused no disturbance in wearing these armbands, nor did it interfere with other students' learning as their principals had claimed. The schools had violated their First Amendment right to freedom of speech and expression. They also brought up a Supreme Court case from the year before in their argument. The ruling in Hammond v. South Carolina State College proclaimed that people in public institutions were protected by constitutional rights. The case was decided by the famous Warren Court, led by Chief Justice Warren himself.
However, lawyers representing the Des Moines School Board would argue otherwise. School was a place to learn, not protest. They claimed that since the principal had warned students ahead of time of the punishment for wearing armbands, so the scoundrels had to be punished. The ruling in the 1919 scoreboard case, Shank v. United States, was brought up. In it, the court, led by Chief Justice White, had stated that during the time of war, it was acceptable to restrict the freedom of speech.
It would take 3 months for the students to receive the Supreme Court's verdict, and it was not an easy wait. When asked about whether the townspeople, her classmates, and teachers would support her decision to wear the bracelet, Mary Beth answers, "It was mixed. Some close friends, like my best friend Connie, thought it was okay, but they were more worried for me than supportive. I didn't get a lot of hostility, though, from students, but Chris Eckhart did at Roosevelt High School. Some students hassled him, but a football player told him to stop, saying that Chris had his rights. He was also harassed by a gym teacher and administrators. I think it was the assistant principal who said he'd never get into college because colleges wouldn't want someone like him. He got a master's degree. In town, the reaction was mixed. Some people wrote letters to the editor in favor of us, but some sent really weird hate mail saying we were communists or that we should go back to Russia and other crazy stuff. Someone called our house and threatened to bomb it on Christmas Eve, and when I went back to school after Christmas vacation was over, someone called one morning and told me, "I'm going to kill you." I thought it was crazy, especially because we were just speaking up for peace.
The Warren Court's decision came in February of 1969. In it, the justices ruled 7-2 in favor of the students, to the amazement of Mary Beth Tinker, who says that she didn't think kids could win. Justice Abe Fortress wrote the majority decision. In it, he stated that students don't shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. Tinker v. Des Moines became the first case in which the freedom of speech rights regarding public school children were addressed. After the ruling, administrators were supposed to allow student speech unless it caused a substantial disruption of the school or intruded on the rights of others.
Even years after the court's ruling, Tinker v. Des Moines would be limited by other Supreme Court rulings. In 1988, the case Hazelwood v. Clemere was brought to the attention of Chief Justice Rehnquist and his justices. Students in Hazelwood East High School in St. Louis produced a school-sponsored and funded newspaper called The Spectrum. One issue featured stories on teen pregnancy and divorce. The school's principal deleted the 2-page containing the inappropriate and offensive stories. The students felt their First Amendment rights had been violated and took their case to the Supreme Court. In a 5-3 decision, the justices limited the rights of freedom of press in schools. The court decided that although Tinker v. Des Moines gave students freedom of speech, it did not give them the right to disregard civilized social order. The conservative court claimed that the educators did not offend the First Amendment. They were simply exercising editorial control. In the more modern case, Morse v. Frederick of 2007, the Supreme Court decided that the Tinker v. Des Moines ruling only protected political speech. Joseph Frederick, a senior at Juneau Douglas High School, unfurled the banner saying "Bong Hits for Jesus" during the Olympic torch relay through Juneau, Alaska on January 24, 2002. Frederick was suspended from school for 10 days for violating school policy, which forbid advocating the use of illegal drugs. The Supreme Court agreed that the freedom of speech did not extend to "Bong Hits for Jesus" because it could be promoting illegal drug use. Schools will allow the right to safeguard students from propaganda using drug use. The Tinker v. Des Moines case would be cited in 6,000 other court cases.
The Tinker v. Des Moines court case had a great impact on the nation. It allowed students the ability to speak freely, as long as it was appropriate, on their thoughts and beliefs. No longer could students be reprimanded for promoting peace or a Christmas truce. The court case would also affect Mary Beth.
Use our talents, skills, experiences to take the world forward, to make the world a better place while we're here on earth. And so that has really directed my life quite a bit. And there's a prayer that my parents used to like. It starts out, "Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace." It's Saint Francis, I think, of Assisi, and that really has directed my life. It had to do with increasing the peace, not only in the world as far as war and peace, but also in families, and decreasing the pain and suffering that families and children were facing.
After working several years as a nurse, she now travels around America, speaking to students on the importance of freedom of speech. Tinker v. Des Moines was a monumentous court case, paving the path for freedom of speech for public school children. It also showed us that students have the ability to change the world, one armband at a time.